Chapter 5 Frequent Communion. Faced with the practice of his time marked by Jansenism, which distanced the faithful from Eucharistic communion and generated indifference and impiety, Father Eymard sets about speaking fervently in favor of frequent communion, even daily. He relies on the Gospel, the teaching of the Council of Trent, and church tradition. It is in the Eucharist that the goodness and mercy of God manifest themselves in a forceful manner. So, come to the holy table, come visit the Blessed Sacrament. It is certain that in the soul that participate in it worthily, the Eucharist produces some sweetness and happiness that can be experienced only in the reception of this divine sacrament. The Lord attracts us by His kindness. Why does God insist so much on communicating to us His sweetness and gentleness? Because there is only one thing that attaches us to God, His goodness. We are faithful to Him only because His goodness attracts us and we expect its good effects in us. That's our nature, to attach ourselves to goodness and not to power. There is no sympathy between those who are not equal, and the powerful are surrounded by those who are envious, and kings have some friends in the real sense of this word. For God it is the same. We tremble before His power because our misery is frightening. Look at Sinai, the Jewish people cry out to Moses, trembling, asking him to speak to the Lord for them because they do not dare approach a God who manifests the display of His great power. Exodus 20:19. Besides, between men, relationships of friends do not exist because of qualities. Either we have them and we become rivals, or we don't have them and we become envious. And so, men who possess the most beautiful virtues have many enemies, and the people who are well off are obliged to bear with the unfriendliness of all those who are not like them. Nor do we attach ourselves to God because of His holiness. It shames us poor sinners, and His brightness merely shows us our hideous ugliness. But we love Him because of His goodness. He wants to save us. He witnesses His love to us and descends to our level in order to witness it to us more perfectly. And the more our Lord shows us His goodness, the more are we drawn to His love. Which mysteries touch our hearts the most? Are they not those of Calvary, where Jesus Christ shows us an infinite love and goodness? It is then in the profound humiliations of God that we can unite ourselves to Him and call Him our brother and a part of our family. Likewise, the rich man makes himself loved by the poor when he descends to his level, when he opens his tender and generous heart, and not by throwing money to him, even by giving him all the gold in the world. The kindness of God revealed in Jesus Christ. Never forget this: the goodness that attaches man to God is the goodness of God manifested especially in our Lord. This goodness alone attaches us to God in a persevering way. When do we see Jesus Christ adorned on earth with a heart burning with love? Is it not when He shows Himself to be good and merciful? Is it not then that He attaches Himself with an indissoluble bond to those souls on whom His goodness has fallen? The Magi adorn Him because in the stable He is all lovable. The blind man who has just received the benefit of his sight adores Him and asks to follow Him everywhere. Mark 10:53. He is moved in gratitude for the goodness that Jesus Christ has shown him. The Canaanite woman adores him and obtains the cure of her daughter. Matthew 15:21 to 28. Magdala sees her sins pardoned and her love burns with a fire that will never go out. Our Lord had shown such goodness to her. Luke 7:36 to 50. Yes, he is recognized, and it is certain that we begin to attach ourselves to him through his goodness. From there, we proceed to his other attributes. And the church that values so highly the things of God says in one of its prayers, God, whose nature is goodness, why not his other attributes? God is all in all, and all his attributes are equal. Yes, but in relation with us, the nature of God's is goodness. Now, let us go directly to our subject. If what we have said is true, there where Jesus Christ shows us his greatest love, that's where he should be loved the most. Now, is it not it in the Eucharist that the goodness of God is manifested in a most striking way? The Council of Trent says that in this sacrament God he has apparently poured out the riches of his love. It is the limit of his all powerful love. St. Augustine says that God could not do more than give himself to us. For with him we have the eternal God, his mortal life and all his states, the redemption and its fruits, his glory through the resurrection, whose guaranteed comes from the Eucharist. The one who receives communion receives then the greatest amount of happiness and grace that God could possibly give. In addition, the soul receives the feeling of this happiness and the understanding of this sweetness, and it really should receive it. Why? Because this happiness from communion, this gentleness of union with God is necessary for the preservation of the state of grace, ordinarily speaking. Communion, the flower of the state of grace. Notice how communion is truly the gentleness, the flower of the state of grace. The one who receives communion only rarely remains in the state of grace for heaven. But heaven is so far away, that goal, that inspiration is so far, that great faith is needed to keep it always fixed in mind. And this faith is a constant sacrifice, a continual battle against everything that would want to go between the eyes of your soul and this distant goal. There is lacking an actual and encouraging strength. This man is like a traveler far away from his homeland. Whatever precaution he takes, he gets tired and soon continues his journey only with disgust. This is why the one who communicates only rarely cannot remain for long in the state of grace. If he preserves it, he is not very pure, not very beautiful. The dust of the road has tarnished his brightness. I don't say this in an absolute way, but only from the ordinary flow of things and what we learn from common experience. When we communicate, oh, it is so much easier to remain in the state of grace. It is no longer for a distant goal that we carefully preserve it, but for today and tomorrow. We feel it is our title of honor, our right to go to the holy table where we will be rewarded and encouraged. Then we avoid sin out of love so as not to be deprived of Holy Communion, and that communion then becomes a sure rampart against sin. Oh, I understand that without communion it is difficult to preserve oneself. It is a constant struggle without refreshment. While in the second case, we renew our strength each day. then we can easily avoid sin until we die. Yes, I mean voluntary sin. As for sins of weakness, I don't count them. How can a soul that receives communion each day and holds firmly to that practice sin voluntarily? He knows that this sin will deprive him of what he desires. The communion that he is going to receive appears to him as a support and encouragement and prevents him from falling. I even admit that I don't understand the state of grace in any other way. A virtue that is practiced only for better communion. In fact, our Lord placed communion at our disposal with all its sweetness only that we might find there the encouragement and support we need for our Christian duties. For virtue is difficult, it is not natural for man to the extent that those men whom we see gifted with all the natural qualities and practice all the natural virtues, they are the most difficult to bring back to practice actions in a supernatural way, since their first way of acting is far distant from these, and there are many like them. They decapitulate all their actions and despise the crown that should be theirs. This is why our Lord has placed such a sweetness in communion, so that His sweetness will attract us and lighten our crosses. Oh, without that the yoke would not be light. What crosses every day and only crosses? Who could ever bear them? And remember that practical virtues without the sweetness of communion can create saints but also make you miserable. And those saints are walking along the edge of a double abyss. Either they get discouraged or they become proud and then they are no longer saints. Meanwhile, the virtue that is practiced only to receive communion better does not look at itself. It is not for itself, it is for greater dignity and welcome in the visit in the union with Jesus Christ. This soul listens to Jesus who is saying, "Become ever more and more virtuous because I am the greatest virtue and you will never equal me." Then virtue is only a preparation for or a thanksgiving after communion. It does not remain in itself. It sees itself only in Jesus, and how could it ever become proud? It sees itself so inferior to its model. Then there is no pride. Consequently, there is no danger. Let the one who wants to persevere receive the Lord. Communion produces the positive constancy of virtues. Nothing is more discouraging than long perseverance seen from afar. It is very difficult to embrace such a goal. That's the ordinary temptation of converts and beginners, and the devil causes many to fall with this temptation. Let the one who wants to persevere receive our Lord. It is a bread that will nourish his weak strength and sustain him, and the church wants it that way. It encourages daily communion as the Council of Trent witnesses. Some say that we must use much prudence. Without doubt, by right, the church has reason, but in practice, we must place a restraint on this feeling. It is sufficient, they say, for big feast for the ordinary faithful, but we can reply to them that this nourishment taken after such intervals is only an extraordinary food. Where then is the ordinary food of every day that must sustain me? How do you expect me to practice the virtues? They have value only through the love of God. Now this love is given and sustained only through communion, a joy that is unexplained. Go to the holy table, come to visit the Blessed Sacrament. Believe sincerely in the atmosphere of grace in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament and in the places where He abides. Even when we come with nothing to ask Him, we feel the impression and the change. There is an atmosphere. The Eucharist is a perfume that can be felt even by atheists. And you, mothers, wives, or sisters who are asking for a special conversion, go to communion, bring Jesus home with you. He is a fire, radiating from you to go and warm around you, a light that will shine through you. He will be breathed in, you will be respected at first, then loved along with the one you are carrying. Oh, I have faith in the presence and the atmosphere of Jesus. When he goes near poor sinners, he chases away the devil. And concerning those who receive him well, even the wicked will say, we feel good with this person. Notice how David, who possessed the Spirit of God without having the joy of really possessing him, knew how to appease Saul with his mere presence. Saul became calm and quiet in his presence in spite of the devil that possessed him. 1 Samuel 16:14 to 23. And that's what will happen with you when faced with atheists. These, when alone, can experience fear. It is a general remark that has been verified that the atheist is afraid of his solitude and he looks to drown it in the dissipation of his accomplice and companions. And atheists remain what they are due to laziness. There are no atheists in principle, that should be clear. And so these miserable and troubled atheists, when they are alone, find happiness from a joy that is unexplained when they are with a wife or a pure child who has received communion. The reason is that Jesus Christ calms them by his presence that is so gentle and beneficent. Communion makes the virtues sweet and lovable. I am finished. Communion then makes the state of grace lovable, and by that very fact it assures its perseverance because Jesus Christ becomes the direct goal. It makes virtues constant and lovable and easy to practice because it feeds them and makes them sweet, remaining their distant and crucifying aspect. Therefore, we encourage you sincerely to receive communion. The Church desires this. It wants you to learn, in a sense, to act well in paradise. For what are they doing there? They are receiving Jesus Christ constantly, although in a different way, his knowledge and his love. And so begin now in order to be ready. It's an abuse. Forget it. Does a child who visits his father and remains constantly with him abuse him? Of course not. Likewise with our Lord. Thursday, March 21, 1867. Public preaching in the chapel of the religious in Paris, 23.